The weirdest part? She didn't even flinch when she read it. That damn note. I folded it 3 times like I'd seen in movies, left it half-tucked under the salt shaker on the table, and walked out without looking back. I thought maybe she'd come running. Maybe she'd shout my name, panic in her voice, eyes wide with guilt. But she didn't even stand up. She just kept eating her salad. I had written 3 words, "Don't come home," and she stared at them like they were instructions she had expected all along. I didn't sleep that night. The sounds from the hotel hallway, ice machine, laughter, someone dragging a suitcase, all of it blurred into static. I kept staring at my phone screen, which lit up again and again with her name. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear it. Because the moment I walked into that cafe and saw her with him, I swear, the air got knocked out of my chest. She was sitting with her back half turned toward the window, smiling in that polite, rehearsed way she used when she wanted to look innocent. The man across from her leaned in like he was used to her already, like they weren't on a first meeting, like he already knew the shape of her knees under the table. And the worst part? It was a Thursday afternoon. Normal. Boring. She told me she was at her dentist appointment, said they might dilate her pupils and she might need a ride back. I offered to come get her. She told me not to. She said she'd take a cab, that it wasn't a big deal. So why was she in a low-lit cafe sipping wine with someone who wasn't her husband? I was 2 tables away before either of them noticed. I didn't shout. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a single word. I ordered a cappuccino I didn't even want, walked over while she was mid-laugh, slid the folded note onto her side of the table, and walked out. No drama. No scene. I thought that would be the hardest part. It wasn't. The hard part came 12 hours later, when I got the notification that the doorbell camera had been ripped off the front of our house. Just gone. No recording. Just one final frame of her looking straight into the lens before the screen cut to black. I still have that screenshot. It's not fear on her face. It's not confusion. It's not even anger. It's something else. Like amusement. Like she knew I'd be watching. At 3:42 a.m., I got a Venmo request for $87 labeled, "Your portion of the utilities." That was followed by a photo she sent to my mom, not to me, of her grinning in the living room, holding a welcome back banner. There were balloons. Her sister was in the background with a glass of champagne. I hadn't even been gone a full day, and she had already moved someone in. I'm not exaggerating. I checked the timestamps. Less than 16 hours after I left, she had a man, not the one from the cafe, sitting on my couch, drinking whiskey from the glass I always used. She sent that photo to my mom. And my mom? She liked it. Reacted with a heart emoji. No caption. Just silence. And I know what you're thinking. There's no way that's real. But it is. This isn't about heartbreak anymore. This is about trying to piece together how many people knew. How many people smiled at me while knowing exactly who she really was. Because I think I've only just now realized this wasn't spontaneous. It was a setup. A long one. And I might have walked into it like a fool with a croissant in one hand and a coffee in the other. By the time I dragged myself out of that awful hotel bed the next morning, I had 43 unread messages, 8 missed calls, and 1 email titled, "Urgent, property access required," from my own wife. I hadn't even digested what happened the night before, and already she was sending legal-sounding emails. I didn't open it right away. I was afraid of what I might find, or worse, what I wouldn't. But curiosity eventually wins over denial, even when it feels like acid in your chest. The email read like it had been drafted days ago. Cold. Precise. She was requesting that I remove my belongings from the house within 48 hours because, get this, she had already begun converting our shared residence into a co-living space. A co-living space. As if our home, the place where I bled into the walls over the years building furniture with my bare hands, laying floor tile myself because we couldn't afford contractors, had suddenly become a business project. She even attached a flyer. Urban Modern Living. Private room for rent. Couples welcome. With a photo of my old study, now a guest bedroom. The books I once read to help her through insomnia were stacked neatly in a decorative pile, next to candles I didn't recognize. That's when it hit me. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a meltdown. This was preparation. She hadn't been caught off guard at the cafe. She hadn't been surprised by the note. She had expected it. Maybe even wanted it. Because she had already moved on, weeks ago, maybe longer. I started putting pieces together, looking backward like a detective too late to the crime scene. That's when I remembered something that had seemed harmless at the time. The week before, She had insisted on helping me update my driver's license address to a P.O. box I never asked for. I laughed it off, figured she was being overly organized. But now I realized she was planting the seeds to legally show I didn't live there. She was erasing me before I even left. And the thing that broke me the most, worse than the lies, worse than the image of her with other men, was realizing I hadn't just been betrayed. I'd been outmaneuvered, played, by the person I trusted most. Around noon, I drove to the house. Not to go inside. I didn't have a key anymore. I just parked across the street, behind a florist van, and stared at the windows like I was watching a stranger's life unfold in my old skin. The front door opened. A man came out. Not the one from the cafe. Not the one in the photo she sent to my mom. A third one. This guy had keys. Real ones. Not a visitor. Not a date. Someone who'd already unpacked. He looked maybe 24. Backwards cap. Wore a t-shirt that said, "Vote for tacos." I watched him toss a trash bag into the bin, one of my bins, and then check his phone like nothing mattered. Like I was the outsider. I swear I sat there for almost an hour, trying to convince myself to walk up and ring the bell. To demand an explanation. Closure. Justice. Anything. But I didn't. Because somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't about catching her anymore. This was about surviving what she had already done. And I couldn't help but wonder, how long had she been planning this? Who else knew? Was this some twisted project for her? An experiment in emotional control? I started digging. That night, I opened an old shared cloud account we hadn't used in years. She probably thought I forgot it even existed. But I hadn't. She once uploaded all our photos there. Vacations, birthdays, even mundane things like us laughing in the laundry room because the dryer broke. That was when I found it. A video. Uploaded 3 weeks ago. Private. Untitled. I clicked play. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't scandalous. It was worse. It was her. Alone. Sitting in the living room. Talking directly to the camera. And the first sentence shattered me. So, if you're watching this, that means you finally walked away. Congrats. Took you long enough. I watched the entire thing without blinking. She sat on our old couch, the one we bought secondhand during our second year of marriage, the one I reupholstered by hand because we couldn't afford new furniture. That couch had scratches from our dog, wine stains from her birthday party, and a tiny rip on the armrest we always promised to fix. And there she was, sitting right in the center like a queen on her throne, one leg tucked under her, looking calm. No tears. No shame. Just calm. Eliza looked straight into the camera, as if she had rehearsed it a dozen times before pressing record. Her voice was casual, almost cheerful, like she was making a vlog for someone who subscribed to betrayal. So, Colton, she began. First of all, if you're watching this, that means you've seen enough to finally leave. It took you longer than I expected, but here we are. She sipped from a mug that I recognized instantly. It was mine. The one that said #OneSleepyhead. A dumb gift she gave me when we were still stupid in love. I guess I should say sorry, right? She continued. But honestly, I'm not. I tried to hint for months that I wasn't happy. I left trails. I needed you to notice. I needed you to do something. You didn't. You just kept making toast and pretending everything was fine. I paused the video, sat in silence, then hit play again. I've changed, she said, eyes narrowing slightly. I didn't want to hurt you, but I needed a different life. Something more spontaneous. Real. Not just folded laundry and slow mornings. You always wanted a peaceful life. I wanted something else. You couldn't see it, so I stopped waiting for you to. She smiled at the camera. Actually smiled. And yes, before you ask, there was more than one. You probably saw one of them. The barista, the trainer, the kid from the wine tasting night, doesn't matter. They weren't the point. The point was that I felt seen with them. Wanted. Alive. There was a brief pause. Her smile faded just slightly. I know this looks cruel, but honestly, Colton, you disappeared long before I did. You became wallpaper. You were just there. Kind, boring, loyal wallpaper. She leaned forward toward the camera, lowering her voice to a whisper. I need chaos. You need comfort. And that's not compatible. She reached for the remote and ended the video there. No goodbye. No apology. Just that. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed in total silence for maybe 20 minutes. The carpet looked like it had been vacuumed by someone who gave up halfway through. I stared at the swirls in the cheap fabric and felt like I was falling into them. I wanted to scream. Break something. drive straight to the house and demand answers. But I didn't. I watched the video again, and then again, because the more I watched it, the more things started falling into place, things I'd missed. And suddenly, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in months. Her coworker from marketing, this guy named Julian. He used to like my posts online. We even chatted once about guitars when I uploaded a cover. But he vanished about 8 months ago. No likes. No comments. Just disappeared from the feed. At the time, I assumed he'd unfollowed me because I posted too many food pics. But now it seemed like more than that. I went back into my phone, scrolled through our old texts, and there it was. A single text from Eliza dated last November that said, "Ugh, Julian's getting annoying." That was it. No explanation. Nothing after it. I opened his profile. Private. But his latest post, public for some reason, showed him at a rooftop party. The background? Unmistakable. It was the upstairs patio at our old building, the one we moved out of a year ago. He tagged 2 people. One of them was Eliza. Not just tagged. She was in the photo. She was on his lap, laughing, holding a red Solo cup, wearing my hoodie. That photo was taken 3 weeks before our anniversary. And now I knew she didn't just fall out of love with me. She walked away slowly, deliberately, with a drink in her hand and a smile on her face, while I was back home making a playlist for our dinner. She filmed the goodbye video, in advance. Like I was a canceled subscription she already unsubscribed from. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was furious. But not at her. At myself. Because somehow, I let this happen. The morning after watching that video for the 3rd time, I drove to a gas station just to be around people. Not talk to anyone. I couldn't have formed a sentence if I tried, but because I needed the illusion of normal. Strangers arguing over pump spots. A guy complaining about the price of beef jerky. Just noise. Just movement. Anything but the silence I'd been drowning in. I sat in the car with my engine running, staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror like I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were glassy, skin pale, like someone who'd been sick for weeks. The same hoodie I'd worn the day I saw her at the cafe still hung on my shoulders, and the same crushed receipt with "Don't come home" scrawled across it was still in my back pocket. Like part of me was afraid to let it go. Proof I'd finally stood up. Sort of. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. Started writing. I didn't know what. Maybe a list of what I needed to grab from the house, or maybe just a way to feel like I still had control over something. But that's when I noticed a notification at the top of the screen. "You have been removed from the group chat. Merrick Family Sunday Roast." I blinked. It was a group chat with her family. Her sisters, cousins, even her dad. They weren't just her family. They were mine too, or at least I thought they were. I was the guy who fixed her brother's radiator in December, who stayed up late helping her cousin rewrite a scholarship essay. Removed. Just like that. I went to my texts and opened her dad's last message to me. It had been a blurry photo of a burnt burger from a few weeks ago, captioned, "Need grill lessons, son?" I responded with a laughing emoji. That was the last thing we exchanged. No hint. No warning. Just silence since then. I called his number. Straight to voicemail. Then, without meaning to, I checked my social media. I hadn't used it much since this mess started, but my curiosity was eating me alive. And that's when I saw the post. A photo of Eliza and that same guy from the rooftop party, Julian, standing in front of a painted wall that read, "Start fresh. Start loud." They were smiling like they were being photographed for a lifestyle brand. The caption? "New beginnings deserve real endings. No more pretending." Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. "Proud of you. So happy you found your truth. Finally choosing yourself. You look free." Not a single mention of me. Not a word about a marriage. About the person she shared a mortgage with. About the man who once stood up in a restaurant just to clap after she got promoted. I'd been scrubbed clean from the narrative. No villain. No victim. Just vanished. I felt my lungs tighten like the air had turned solid. How long had she been painting this version of events? Was I just background noise in her journey to freedom? A footnote? But then something strange happened, something small, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I checked the comments again, refreshed the page, and I noticed that one comment was gone. One I swear had been there when I first opened the post. It said, "Wow, bold move considering the timeline." It had a few replies before, people arguing, asking what they meant. Now it was just gone. Deleted. And that's when I realized. Not everyone was buying the story. Someone new. Someone knew that Eliza had been planning this for longer than she let on. That the freedom she claimed had been built with lies, layer by layer, carefully curated to cast her as the bravest KP and me as the invisible wallpaper she outgrew. And if even one person had the nerve to say it publicly, even if it was deleted, that meant there were more watching from the sidelines. Silent, maybe, but watching. That's when the idea hit me like a flash of static electricity. If she was going to rewrite the truth, I was going to find the parts she left out. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't interested in burning it all down. I just wanted the truth. The real truth. And I had no idea how deep I'd have to dig to find it. The first place I went wasn't a lawyer's office or a therapist. It was a UPS store. I needed a mailing address that didn't lead to her house, her hands, or anyone who called me buddy and knew what I used to be. It felt absurd, standing in line behind a guy shipping auto parts while I signed up for a private mailbox like someone entering witness protection. But this was the new reality. An address with no past. I left the store and drove aimlessly for a while. Every red light felt like a trial, like the universe pausing just long enough to make me feel the weight of every choice I'd ignored. Eventually, I ended up at a strip of businesses across town where Eliza used to work part-time before she landed her big agency job. Back then, she managed small events for a venue called Gray Point Collective, mostly wedding receptions, fundraisers, community mixers. I wasn't even sure why I was there. Maybe I was hoping someone would tell me this was all a prank, that she'd had a breakdown, that aliens had replaced her. Anything that explained why the woman who once watched sunsets with me barefoot on a cold porch now had a revolving door of boyfriends and a welcome mat I didn't recognize. But it wasn't just nostalgia. Something had been bothering me since I watched her farewell video. The casual way she said she needed something different, the way she listed names so confidently, like rehearsed bullet points. Like someone who had practiced how to sound honest while lying. That kind of manipulation isn't learned overnight. You don't become that surgical unless you've done it before. I parked down the block from Gray Point and sat in my car for over an hour before I worked up the nerve to go inside. The receptionist was a bored teenager clicking through TikToks. I introduced myself under the lie that I was looking to book the space for a friend's engagement party. She handed me a clipboard and asked me to write down my email. And that's when I saw it, a flyer pinned on the corkboard behind her desk. Private guest speaker, redefining partnership, Eliza Merrick. Date? 2 months ago. Topic? Creating bold boundaries, from shared lives to individual power. I stared at her name. Bold white letters on a slate gray background, next to a stylized photo of her from the shoulders up. Perfect smile. Black turtleneck. Like some kind of life coach. I asked the receptionist if the event had been recorded. She shrugged and pointed to a small QR code next to the flyer. I scanned it with my phone. It led to an unlisted video. When I got back to my car and hit play, I was expecting more of the same. My wife waxing poetic about growth and freedom. Instead, I found something much worse. It wasn't just a motivational talk. It was a confession. In front of a room of 30 strangers, she stood there, clicker in one hand, coffee in the other, talking about me. Not by name, but clearly me. She described a partner who never questioned anything, a man, so stable he became invisible, and told a room full of hopeful, well-meaning professionals that sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is escape the comfort she helped create. The crowd nodded. She went on to say that the reason she succeeded in moving forward so quickly was because she designed her exit like a launch, not a collapse. She encouraged them to document, prepare, and, her exact words, curate the narrative before the other person even knows there's a story unfolding. And then she said something that made my blood chill. Don't wait for the argument. Don't wait for the affair to be caught. Design the aftermath like you designed the beginning. The audience applauded. One woman stood up and asked her how she handled guilt. Eliza smiled, tilted her head, and replied, "Guilt is for those who weren't intentional." I was. Intentional. That word echoed in my skull as I shut the video off. She had planned every single step. The false kindness. The delays. The video. Even the gaslighting. She hadn't simply drifted away. She architected an entire reality without me in it while still using my name, my life, and my trust as scaffolding. I sat in my car shaking. Because this wasn't just infidelity. This was a campaign. A presentation. And I was the idiot footnote. That's when I realized I hadn't just been left. I'd been erased. And now, all I wanted was to understand how many people had been sitting in the front row of her story, applauding her while I disappeared behind the curtain. I left the Gray Point Collective parking lot with the kind of silence that feels physical. Like you're not just alone in your car, you're alone on the planet. My hands were trembling against the steering wheel. Not from fear. Not anymore. What I felt now was deeper. A raw, corrosive awareness that I had been turned into a character in someone else's performance, and the script had never included a happy ending for me. I couldn't stop hearing her voice from that presentation, curate the narrative before the other person even knows there's a story unfolding. It repeated in my mind like a skipping record. Who says that? Who talks about their life partner like a PR problem to be managed? Back at the hotel, I shut all the blinds, locked the door, and started printing screenshots. Photos. Posts. Even the deleted comments I'd managed to recover using cached archives. I didn't even know why I was doing it anymore. Maybe part of me thought if I had a folder full of evidence, I could make sense of it. Or prove I wasn't crazy. Or maybe I just needed something physical, something I could hold, because everything else had evaporated. I printed her guest speaker flyer. I printed the comment from her cousin under Julian's rooftop photo that read, "Heard you two were inevitable," before it vanished. I even printed the public flyer from her upcoming Emotional Resilience workshop in Denver, where she was listed as a featured speaker. And that's where I saw it. In small font at the bottom of the flyer was a short line that read, "Co-sponsored by TrueScale Wellness Initiative Program Manager, L. Swinton." That name jolted something loose in my brain. Swinton. I hadn't heard that name in almost 2 years. It belonged to Laura Swinton, a woman Eliza used to work with at the ad agency, back when things still felt normal. They weren't close. At least, not that I ever saw. But Laura was the one person who made Eliza uncomfortable. She once described her as too blunt, too probing. Said she didn't like how Laura asked personal questions. But now she was co-sponsoring a workshop with her? I Googled the TrueScale initiative. It was real. Legit. Mid-sized nonprofit focused on helping people transition out of toxic dependency cycles. They hosted speakers. Facilitated retreats. But here's what made my breath catch. When I went to their archived newsletter page and searched for Eliza's name, I found an entry from over a year ago. It was short. Just a mention. Eliza Merrick will be offering select workshop material for our pilot session titled Unbuilding the Marriage Myth. Her strategic insights have already helped several participants reclaim their stories with clarity and courage. A year ago. Not weeks. Not months. She'd been coaching other people on how to leave their marriages before I even knew ours was falling apart. This wasn't a divorce. This was content creation. I felt a pit open in my stomach. I sat down on the edge of the bed, papers scattered around me like pieces of someone else's life. Because that's what it had become, hadn't it? The woman I married had rewritten her existence so thoroughly that she no longer shared it with me. Not spiritually. Not emotionally. Not legally. I was a ghost. A name she'd erased, carefully, gently, methodically, while smiling over coffee and asking if I wanted eggs. I picked up my phone and called the only person I could think of, Sam, my oldest friend. Someone who had been suspicious of Eliza from the start, but never pushed it. He answered on the second ring, sounding groggy. I told him everything. Every detail. I talked for 15 minutes straight without taking a breath. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, "She's not just leaving you, man. She's using you. Has been. Maybe from the beginning. And somehow, that was worse. Because I could live with someone falling out of love. But the idea that I'd been nothing more than a tool? A carefully shaped piece of her narrative arc? That was a different kind of death. And just when I thought it couldn't go any deeper, Sam said something I'll never forget. I probably shouldn't say this, but last year, she invited me to something. A truth circle thing. Said it was a private retreat. I thought it was weird. I didn't go. But now I'm wondering if that whole thing was about you. The moment Sam said it, that whole thing was about you, something shifted in my chest. Not like a punch or a stab. No. It felt more like an elevator cable snapping inside me. The sudden drop. The weightlessness just before impact. I remember the invitation he was talking about. Vaguely. I'd seen it on our fridge last year, clipped under a magnet shaped like a pineapple. The print was soft, feminine, with pastel colors and a delicate title, Sacred Retreat, Rewriting the Self. I'd assumed it was one of Eliza's wellness events. She said it was just a women's reset weekend, and I didn't ask questions. That was always my flaw, mistaking avoidance for trust. Sam sent me a screenshot of the invitation from his email. I opened it and stared, pulse rising. The flyer didn't just mention Eliza, she was listed as the facilitator, not a participant. The lead. It said, Join Eliza Merrick, emotional architect and strategic exit designer, for a transformational 3-day journey into radical detachment and personal redefinition. For anyone ready to rewrite their reality and detach from identity-based enmeshment. I didn't even know what half those words meant. What I did know. She had held this retreat 2 months before our last anniversary. She was guiding people through the process of abandoning their marriages, while still wearing my ring at home, while still planning vacations, while still asking if we should adopt a dog next spring. I went cold. But the real punch came when I scrolled to the bottom and found the session titles. Why Closure is a Luxury. The Invisible Spouse, Escaping Without a Scene. Don't apologize, explain nothing. Staying ahead of their grief. And the last one. The Pre-Written Goodbye, Crafting Control. That's when I knew the video she left me wasn't spontaneous. It was part of the curriculum, a performance she had taught to others, a rehearsed ritual to give the illusion of grace while abandoning someone like a discarded coat. I stood up and nearly knocked over the lamp beside the hotel bed. My breathing was shallow. Every moment I thought I understood. The cafe, the note, the missing doorbell cam, now felt like curated milestones in some deranged how-to manual. She didn't fall out of love. She didn't lose interest. She studied how to exit with narrative advantage. I called the venue listed on the flyer. Pretended I was an interested guest for future retreats. The woman on the other end, polite but mechanical, said Eliza no longer hosted through them, but had branched out into digital offerings and private sessions. Private sessions. That meant this wasn't over. She was still doing it. Coaching people to abandon their relationships, not for safety, not for healing, but for some warped brand of control disguised as empowerment. Leaving not because you have to, but because it lets you win the breakup. That night, I searched her name online until my thumbs went numb. On page 4 of the results, buried beneath YouTube podcasts and Pinterest pins, I found a link to a review site. Small, obscure, like a Yelp for wellness seminars. There were only a handful of reviews. The most recent one hit me like a brick to the teeth. I'll be honest, I followed Eliza's strategy too closely. I used the silent exit, the no contact, the pre-filmed goodbye. I felt powerful for a while. But 3 months later, my ex-husband had a mental health episode. His sister called me from the hospital. I couldn't even explain to her what I'd done, just that I'd followed Eliza's process. I don't know if I helped myself or broke him. Anonymous. I stared at the screen, trembling. Because suddenly I wasn't angry anymore. I was terrified, not of Eliza, but of how many people she had convinced that emotional cruelty was a form of healing, that erasure was strength, that walking away without a word was growth. I wasn't the only one who'd been left mid-sentence. I was just the one who happened to pull back the curtain. And now, I had a decision to make. Not whether to confront her, I'd already missed that train, but whether to tell the story myself, before she rewrote the ending. I never confronted her. Not in the way I imagined. No shouting match. No grand reveal. No final words with trembling hands. Because I finally understood, that's what she would have expected. That's what she designed for. A chaotic exit. Something she could point to later and say, see? I had to leave. Look how unstable he became. No, I gave her nothing. Instead, I wrote my own version of the story. I started quietly. I took down the photos from our shared cloud, transferred every account I could out of both our names, and submitted my separation paperwork without so much as a signature request from her. I'd spoken with a lawyer, not for revenge, but for peace. She didn't want a partner, just a platform. And I refused to be anyone's backdrop anymore. But something shifted in me the morning I received an unexpected email. It was from Laura Swinton, the one who co-sponsored Eliza's event. Her message was short, just one paragraph. But every word felt like oxygen in a vacuum. I don't know where you stand with Eliza now, and I won't pretend to understand it. But I wanted you to know, you were not invisible. I was in that audience when she spoke. And while everyone clapped, I kept thinking, there's a real person on the other end of this story. I just wanted you to hear that, from someone who saw the whole performance. That's when I stopped seeing myself as erased. Because someone did notice. Someone watched the curtain rise and still thought of me. I printed that email and folded it into my wallet. I left the hotel 2 days later and signed a short lease in a small town an hour away. Not to escape, but to start somewhere that didn't echo her voice. I found a little cottage behind a bakery, the kind where the floorboards creak and no one asks questions when you sit alone reading for hours. I started documenting everything, not for court, not to attack, but for myself. I turned all the screenshots, all the notes, into a journal. I gave each entry a new title. Not what she called it, but what I lived. Your portion of the utilities became how she cut me off to feel whole. Creating bold boundaries became leaving without looking back. Radical detachment became when empathy dies. I burned the video she left me. Literally. On a thumb drive in a rusted metal bin behind the cottage. I watched the plastic melt and curl under the flame. The words she rehearsed finally silenced by real fire. I never checked her profile again. I didn't need to. Because I stopped living in the version of myself she wrote. I stopped replaying the cafe scene. I stopped asking why she smiled like that at someone else. Because the truth was, that smile wasn't stolen from me. It had never really been mine. And that was okay. I met someone new a few months later. Not romantically. Just a stranger at a weekend book fair who asked why I looked like I'd just stepped out of a storm. Her name was Maeve. She ran a grief journaling workshop. She didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. She didn't try to fix me. She just said, "You look like someone who survived someone else's story." I told her, "I think I'm finally writing my own." She smiled. And for the first time in what felt like forever, it felt like a page was turning. Not ripped. Not torn. Just turned. On purpose. By me.